Hello, my name's Aaron Ellis. I'm the founder of my own strategy consultancy, Ellis Disley. I write a weekly newsletter about how people can use strategy and complex strategic theory in sort of their everyday lives. And about 2 years ago, I attended bar here and saw the very first Worldwide Wednesday. So it's great to see how much it's progressed in all that time. So what I'm going to talk about is strategy and how to think strategically. Strategy, I imagine, can be quite an imposing word. It can also sort of conjure up very intimidating images of chess masters and sort of military leaders and everything like that. But what I'm sort of going to do today is sort of very simply explain what strategy is, why I think sort of Remainers need it, how to do it, and then where it can sort of take us. Very simply put, strategy is achieving your ambitions as stuff tries to stop you. There's a common sort of widespread belief that a strategy is a plan, but they're actually two very different things. A plan sort of assumes that you move from one step to another in a very orderly way. So again, from point A to point B to point C. A strategy assumes that while you're trying to get to point A to point C, someone is trying to shoot you. So you need to figure out how can you actually get to where you want while stuff is trying to stop you. And that could be tangible things from Nigel Farage or Theresa May, or it could be intangible things like time after the invoking of Article 50. And I think in the last few years, Remainers have had a lot of things trying to stop us achieving our ambitions, which is staying in the EU. Most importantly, to begin with, we lost the referendum. Then there was the fact that we had a government that felt it would be politically beneficial to itself to start a sort of culture war with people who voted Remain. Then Article 50, creating that sort of time limit on what people who were unhappy about the result could do. And now in most recent months, the sort of unexpected revival of Nigel Farage and the serious possibility that no deal could become an actual government policy. So given all that, how do we actually think strategically? That can seem very imposing, but there's actually three very simple things you can do to start to think strategically. One, assess a problem. Two, come up with a sort of vague idea of how to solve it. And then three, turn that idea into actions. And I'll sort of give you two examples, one sort of personally, professionally related, and another sort of that relates to the whole sort of Ramona movement. Last year I was asked to come up with a communication strategy for an MP. Now, the MP had a perfectly fine message, which was basically make his constituency great again. But I realised after a few weeks observing his office that more effort went into appearing to communicate that message than actually communicating that message. So if 20 press releases were produced a week, that would be considered success. Whereas whether any voters were actually reading those press releases and deciding to then vote for the MP was beside the point. So given that that was the problem that the MP was facing, my sort of guiding idea to solve it was outcome over output. Essentially, how much content the MP produced, whether press releases, Facebook messages, Twitter posts, really didn't matter. It was all about outcome. So from this sort of outcome over output idea, I then turned that into actions. To begin with, we didn't know how people in the constituency got their news. There was a general assumption that people read the local papers and if the press releases were put into the local papers, everyone in the constituency read them, therefore they will then support the MP in the next election. What I then recommended was a constituency-wide survey asking people where do they get their news from. If it turned out most people read the Daily Mail and the Mirror, but didn't read the local papers, then it sort of suggested focusing so much on the local papers was a complete waste of time. Then there was the buy-in of the local party, who we needed to get on side for when they're knocking on doors to ask people whether they've actually seen any stories that feature the MP. Because if they can't actually remember the MP about anything, then that suggests that his message isn't cutting through. Then from that data, we could then figure out what strategy, what message can we come up with for the MP, but more importantly, how can we distribute it so that many people see it. So that was a sort of personal experience. In terms of the sort of Remain fight back against Brexit, another good example of this three-step sort of assessing a problem, coming up with a solution, turning it into actions, is led by donkeys. There was a recent sort of long report, sort of profile of the guys who sort of set up Led by Donkeys. And from reading that article, it was very much, they saw a problem, which was the sort of Brexiteer politicians they felt pushing lines that were either contradictory or untrue, or which those politicians themselves were contradicting after making those statements. So their solution to that problem their guiding idea was, how can we bring to light again all the contradictory or untrue or self-contradictory things all these Brexiteer politicians had said. And then they turn that into actions. They raise money to then turn it into posters, vans, follow Nigel Farage on his sort of march with a van reminding everyone all the terrible things he said. So there was an example of sort of, they saw a problem, they came up with a solution, and then they turn it into actions. And that is essentially the foundation of coming up with a strategy. The next step after that is finding allies. Lawrence Friedman, who sort of very famous strategic thinker and who sat on the Iraq Inquiry, he said that the most astute strategic move anyone can make is combining with others. And in a way that sort of goes to the heart of what I think is the argument between sort of Remainers and Brexiteers. I think Brexiteers feel that the secret to good strategy is uninhibited freedom to choose. So if you have no one encumbering you, asking you for stuff, if you have complete freedom to choose anything or do anything you want, then that sort of gives you power. Whereas actually in strategy, the opposite is true, is if you combine with others, you increase your options to achieve your ambitions. It's only by combining with others that you can then leverage what they're capable of to what you're trying to achieve. And I think an example of a group that first appreciated this and then spectacularly unappreciated this is the artists formerly known as the Independent Group. Sort of yesterday, half the group split. And the argument, it seems, from reports, was that half wanted to combine with the Liberal Democrats and half wanted to stay as an independent party. Whereas the sort of genesis of the Independent Group, or Change UK, was MPs from different parties realising that if they combine together, they can have a bigger impact on sort of the case for Britain remaining in the EU. And it sort of seems to me that the split that has happened in the Independent Group and Change UK was that they misunderstood what the ambition was, these two halves. One half was, how can we create a more liberal movement in Britain that would keep Britain in the EU, but also make a sort of more positive case for immigration, or sort of how to make capitalism work better for people who don't feel it is. is to combine with all the Liberal parties that are in Parliament, or all the Liberal-minded MPs, and then there were half who felt that the main ambition is to create a party called Change UK, which can then fight elections and win government. But I also think, the more I've thought about it, that Change UK also misdiagnosed the problem that they were dealing with, which meant that the actions that they subsequently followed through on weren't that effective. It sort of seems to me that sort of the message of Change UK was broken politics. And people here might correct me if I'm wrong, but there is already a broken politics message in British politics, and that is Nigel Farage's argument. And his argument is very much politics is broken, Parliament is terrible, the government is terrible, they all do terrible things, they all hate you, that's why we need to destroy them. And so Change UK, and sort of arguably the Lib Dems as well, and the Splinter Group, they're sort of going after the wrong people, because people who are attracted to the idea of smashing up the system think politics is broken. And I would imagine sort of most people in this room, or sort of people who are naturally minded to vote Lib Dem or Labour or Green, you and they sort of feel that actually government is good, Parliament is good, sort of democracy is good. The problem is that it's just not functioning right now because the two main parties are terrible at what they do. So actually what sort of Change UK and the Lib Dems should be arguing is that here's how politics makes your lives better. Here's how Parliament makes your life better. Here's the good things the government can do for you. That's why you should vote for us. So what next in terms of strategy for sort of Remainers and others of that ilk? I think three key things, and I won't go into too much detail because that's why I set up a consultancy, so people could hire me to, get these answers. But I think sort of build alliances, focused on the broad objective, which is keep Britain in the EU and make Britain more liberal. Avoid divisive discussions about policy, and focus on sharing tactics, because it's only by all these different groups, these different parties sharing tactics about how to defeat sort of the right and the far right that we can actually achieve what we want to achieve. And I'll just finish with yesterday I was reading something I wrote just after Theresa May triggered Article 50. And in this article, I sort of asked whether sort of Ramonas were Winston Churchill in 1940, or if we were those Japanese soldiers in the Filipino jungle who sort of stayed fighting the war sort of, long after it finished. And I would say that the last 2 and a bit years has sort of proven that I think we are Churchill in 1940. And I would hope that we can sort of use strategy in the next several months to make sure that we actually win what we're trying to win. So, yeah, thank you.